My first guest, a modern Renaissance man, a world-class mountaineer, an accomplished filmmaker, a teacher, storyteller with a mission to chronicle the status of the Himalayan glaciers and to help us all understand what's happening in this time of climate change. And please welcome the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Glacier Works, David Breashears. David, thanks for being here.
How are you?
Cool
Happy to see you here.
I feel like we should have given you a better introduction, like you should have rappelled in or something.
That would be appropriate.
I've got carabiners.
It'd be hard to do through this roof here.
We're just happy you're here. We got to talk about your evolution because, again, it's mountaineer. A lot of people go, hey, that Breashears, that's the mountain climber guy. That's the filmmaker guy.
IMAX and
but
all
it's
that
gone
stuff.
a lot further now. You're doing all sorts of climate change. You're teaching. Talk about how all of this has evolved for you.
Well, it started out, I guess, when a 10-year-old boy saw a picture of Tenzing on the top of Mount Everest. That was a picture taken in May of 1953 by Sir Edmund Hillary and set my mind dreaming about what it would be like to be a mountaineer and stand on top of that peak. So I became a rock climber, an ice climber, an alpinist, and when I was 23 years old, I managed to get on my first filmmaking team to Everest for ABC Sports, and that was 1979. And over the years, I've been on 45 expeditions to the Greater Himalayan region. I've led many of those. I've been on Everest 13 times. I've climbed it 5 times. We made the first microwave transmission from the summit, live broadcast in 1983. Had a really hard time getting a 42-pound IMAX camera to the top in 1996. And one year in 2004, actually 2007, I was asked to go take photos of the glaciers. And what I saw astonished me in how fast these glaciers had been melting. And ever since then, now it's been 5 years, we've had 11 expeditions to the world's highest peaks, trying to figure out what's going on over there as climate change related to what's happening to these glaciers.
Well, I know it's your reality. You've been there in person, but what is it like for your job is to, hey, we want you to go to a glacier on the side of the world's tallest mountain, document it, take some photos. What is that like?
It's worth remembering that for almost 33 years, my office, my workplace has been between 20,000 feet and 29,000 feet.
Right.
So we're quite comfortable. In fact, we're more comfortable when it's minus 30 in a 60-mile-an-hour wind at 25,000 feet than I would be if you asked me to do something here in Redmond.
Yeah, you have a hard time breathing down here?
Well, I just don't really know where I am. I've been to the top of Mount Everest probably more times than I've been to Times Square.
Some beautiful footage.
Yeah.
You've documented some unbelievable things as we're seeing.
But it's hard work, and it takes conviction. It takes knowing what your goals are. It takes having great team members, and we do have, and we know the terrain. We know the place, and we know how to operate and execute there. But mostly it's good work. It's rewarding work, and the imagery we're starting to come back with, and some of it, eventually I hope to show you here, it's quite spectacular. And we're turning it into innovative, interactive STEM education program.
Yeah, you've taken this farther than just photos. You've got some new tech at work. We're going to look at that in just a second. It's unbelievable what you were previewing for me. But talk about Glacier Works. This is sort of the evolution of all the things you've been doing.
So I was fortunate to have gained this skill set, you know, and to be a level of competence in getting imagery in the highest terrain on Earth. And when I was sent over to get this photograph of a match photograph of a glacier, which is here's what it looked like in 1921 or 1899. We stand there. Here's what it looks like in 2007.
That's the power of the before and after, right?
It's irrefutable, authentic evidence. I was sent there for Frontline, the PBS series, to get this image. And when I got that image from where George Mallory, because it's there, George Mallory, who died on Everest in June of 1924, it was his image taken in 1921. When I saw this, the devastation to the glacier and how much it had changed in such a short period of time, I thought, man, Breashears, why didn't you know more about this? This has been happening under your feet. You know, you've been walking across this landscape for 30-something years. And it caused me and compelled me to want to know more. And we have now learned a lot more with 11 more expeditions, and we've changed the way we obtain our imagery, we changed the way we use it. But fundamentally, I could take this skill set, which led to a lot of films, and to me, films that didn't amount to a hill of beans.
Right.
You know, they come and go to a project that can have a really big web presence. And
You
we're
had
building,
that eureka moment of this is what I should be showing
and
people.
also, where should I be using these skills? How should I be spending my time? You know, and to me, this has been a really wonderful and rewarding way to spend time. And it's really hard, I'll tell you. Climate change these days is so polarized, and it's such a polemical issue that getting people's attention is hard, and really on a really fundamental level, getting money for climate change, anything to deal with climate change has been really difficult. That's far and away the biggest challenge for our teams.
And as you say, you know, it gets slightly political when you talk about who's at fault and what are we doing wrong and how can we stop this, but you've got a pretty powerful way of expressing the message of the before and after. Here it was, and here it is. Hard to dispute.
And also, we don't provide answers. We pose questions. We don't have a stance. We don't have a position. If we do have a position, it's just changes on the way. What does it mean? How do we better understand it? How do we get people's attention, young, bright people, and get them educated so they'll want to understand the likely scenarios? And if these scenarios or outcomes are negative, then how do we prepare for them, or how do we mitigate them? But the blame game, the sky is falling game, that's not what we do. We sit in the rational middle. We want to bring the very, very best evidence, the very best science to this place, and let people make their own decisions. Because when people are allowed to look at good information and make their own decisions, then, you know, they kind of become owners of that decision they've made, and they become more critical thinkers about problems.
You've got some really eye-popping, you said the very best evidence, the very best technology at work.
Yeah.
You've brought us more than just photos here, some really unbelievable images, live action of what you were experiencing, the Himalayan glaciers, how it's evolving, and you basically, as you said, held the world's highest photo exhibit, right?
That's right. That's right. Now, one thing that I can't show you, I'm having a little glitch in my computer, is the imagery of the before and after wipes.
Right.
So let's just assume that a lot of what we do involves before and after imagery, and I'm going to talk much more about that at the keynote. But what I want to show you here is just some of our interactive imagery, if you'd like to see it.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, we're seeing it now.
So this is pretty simple stuff here. Now, to get an image with 3 or 4 billion pixels is not that hard. You know, you just use a robotic head, or you shoot this stuff manually, and then you stitch it together. So what we're seeing here is Everest, 29,028 feet high.
Wow.
Lhotse's, believe it or not, that's the fourth highest mountain in the world. And although Nuptse's much shorter than these other peaks, it's in the foreground, so it's taller. But with this tool and educators that we're working with, it's getting really, really hard to get the attention of children these days. There's many, many interactive commercial devices and games and other things that that they find much more compelling. And so at GlacierWorks, we want to get their attention. We could zoom in here, for instance, and this has nothing to do with the glaciers, but that's the last village you would visit before you, village, like Yak Herder's pasture, now with a few buildings in it, at 17,000 feet.
This is unbelievable.
Now, if we zoom over here,
I know you're sort of used to what we're seeing here, but this is pretty unbelievable.
Well,
that you can really go right into base camp there.
yeah. Well, I first camped here. I don't know. I was 25 years old or 26 years old in 1983. When I should point out, I had the privilege of being the 135th person to climb Everest. And here I'll just show you with some of our imagery, not necessarily related to GlacierWorks, but here's why.
Wow.
If I went there with you next year, you would be the 6,000th person. Our entire camp.
I'm okay with going there this way.
Yeah,
I'm
our
kind of a
entire
wimp.
camp would have been about this big.
Wow.
But let me just show you what Everest, just for the heck of it, since people are fascinated with
this is what
base
it's
camp.
become.
This is Everest Base Camp in May 2012.
Wow.
Now, I have to tell you, teachers love this stuff because we're not just talking about glaciers, we're talking about people sitting on glaciers.
Yeah.
And then they can take off from here, as they do, on stories of either glaciology, geology, or high-altitude physiology. But just look at the density
It's
of the
sprawling
tents
now.
here.
It's no longer a little camp. It's kind of all over. I mean, this looks like some sort of a sci-fi movie.
And it ends way up here. And it's such...
Wow.
Actually, our camp in 1983 was right up here. So our entire camp, we had this whole mountain to ourselves. What a wonderful experience in 1983. But say we want to make it a little bit more interactive, and we're working really hard with the team here at Microsoft Research on something called RIN, which is a rich interactive narrative. Now, we're still in the process of working out how we're going to use that technology for storytelling. So this, what you're seeing is not RIN-based, but you can see how we want to be able to move people around and get them down on the ground. And my son, he's only 10 years old, and you know, it's hard to get his attention sometimes. But when I sit down and want to tell stories with this, just as a parent, then I can say to my son, let's go inside of this tent here. This is 17,600 feet. We're sitting on ice. Why not place some photographs of the ice that we're talking about here at base camp? So here was the inside of our tent. Now, RIN will have many different menus here. They're not built into this yet, but anyone with an imagination can say, well, choose your theme, choose your story. Or we could say, let's go look at a glacier on the other side of Everest. But this is essentially comparative photography.
Now you've got your own exhibit.
Yeah.
You've got enough people on the ground up there.
Yeah. Now, see, we can see the before and after, right? It's pretty clear. But I want to show you over here a glacier 20 miles away, its behavior to climate change, its response to climate change. This is at the base of the world's highest mountain. So look at the difference. There's the glacier in 1921.
Right.
That's all a glacier under that debris. That's a debris-covered glacier.
Okay.
I'm not a scientist, but of course I need to know all these things. But the other thing is, why not, if we have 1 billion pixels in every image, why don't we just interact with the image? Let's go exploring here. Let's go have a real look. If I can coordinate myself here. There we go. Let's go have a look. And this is what my son and my nieces, they're 13 and 15, as soon as they can move into an image.
So now you've clicked on an image inside of
and now we're
tent.
And now we're in it.
Wow, this is getting frightening.
Well, and then of course imagine all the layers of data and graphs we can bring up over this. We have put none in yet. That's what I'm working with the team at Microsoft Research. You know, for scale, well, there's any number of ways we can put scale on this image. But just remember what you're seeing here, and the glacier was here, and now it's here. There's Everest again from a different position. There's Lhotse. This is the frontier between China and Tibet and Nepal. But we can just go in here. You can see our encampment here at 19,500 feet. And now let's just go inside the tent, because these are the people who we're really interested in. These are the yak herders.
This is unbelievable.
And so we could now click here and learn and have a slideshow about his village.
Wow.
We can find out a video interview with him, maybe learn about his family, because these are the people, the pastoralists and the herders, who are interested in what's happening to these glaciers. They know nothing about the basic mechanism of climate change.
Yeah.
But they know if that glacier was here one year when they were young, or when their father tilled the fields, and it's now gone, that something's happening very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. The photos don't lie. It's really dramatic evidence of what's going on. So what does this mean practically for the people living on that side of the world?
That's for the scientists and the glaciologists and the hydrologists to sort out. You see, what we want to be is we want to take all this wonderful information that scientists have, and there's just so much of it, and translate it into a form, because we're storytellers, and I'm a filmmaker and a photographer, and translate it into a form that the public is very receptive to, and that the public finds very compelling, and students and young people. But it's not GlacierWorks' mission, there's not a single scientist in our group, to try to understand this information.
Right.
Now, there is a lot happening in an image from 1921 to 2007. There's a lot happening in that gap, and they're very good at explaining that. And also what they're very good at explaining is if certain trends continue, what's our future? That's our future. What's it going to look like? And are there things we should prepare for, or things we should really try to get under control as soon as possible?
Right.
So, but eventually if you want to fly, because you know what my son has these games and things that he fools around with.
Oh,
And
yeah.
You know what? He
Oh,
likes
yeah.
to fly, and we could fly you up Everest whenever you want.
Well, that's sort of the way you got to trick kids to learn these
Right.
days, right? Is make education look like a game.
That's right.
And then you got them.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and it's not being done very well because the money is in the games.
Right.
The money, and to me, it's a bit. It's really unfortunate, that someone doesn't say there's these. It's very clear how you get at people's attention because people buy things. The consumer, when it's cool and it works, they buy it.
Right.
And so where is that happening in education at the same scale? And yet we all complain in this country about the poor quality of education. So, but
Well, I
if
can
you wanna
certainly
fly,
see what you're doing there. Yeah, I mean, and I want you to show us how to fly here, but I can certainly see, I mean, there's an obvious wow factor in what you're doing. Those images are unbelievable, and I know you've seen them a ton of times, but to me, I can't even believe that that's real, what I was seeing. The educational factor there is huge.
Well, it
Taking
is.
that
It is
into
when
school.
it is when everything is there. What you're seeing has nothing yet, and that's what we're working with. Why we're working with the team at RIN, because they get it and they understand it. But I'm going to have to move away from the screen, so
Sure.
I need this. I'll tell you when you should come back to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, you said you have a pretty good test audience at home with your son.
Well, but also
he's 10, right? You said
Yeah,
to
but-
try to get his attention is difficult enough, but you're sort of you've got a great test audience to say, how about this?
But
how
what-
about if I let you fly through Everest?
Well, we also have the fact that right now at MIT, we have an exhibit, Rivers of Ice, Vanishing Glaciers of the Greater Himalaya, and it's the first exhibit of this type they've had. That's wholly focused on imagery and earth sciences. That exhibit opened April 21st with a big symposium. We've now had 26 or 28,000 visitors,
Wow.
and it's up for a year. So something's resonating with people. First of all, I've just shown you a bunch of imagery that you've never seen before.
Right.
Now, you've seen Antarctica and the ice. You've seen Greenland. You've seen the Arctic ice pack and Alaska. But you haven't seen that. And guess what? That water flows into rivers. And people, it doesn't flow straight into the sea. So that water has a story. And as we follow that water downstream, we can tell more stories. And we do work with some schools in New England. They're elite schools, but that's so that they can tell us how to develop this tool.
Sure.
And we can push that down to educators who don't have the time to build a lesson on this website. So we work with Milton Academy, Groton, Deerfield Academy, and now MIT. And we're starting to do work with Harvard, only because we got good minds there to help us get the science. Here we are, we're going to fly. We're now...
Yeah, seeing
and now
is
we're
believing,
flying-
so show
well,
us.
Well, we're flying through data.
Okay.
This is made out of 6,000 or 7,000 aerial mapping photos and helicopter flights
Okay.
that we took. And so this is... And this is really a tough nut to crack.
And these
we
are,
haven't-
this is, you said, real aerial photos. I mean, this isn't some
Everest Base Camp would be
regenerated.
down here on the right. No, this is real imagery. Sorry
Wow.
if
It's unbelievable.
if I bring the cursor up, we see the control bar here. So now this is the ice fall from 17 to 19,800 feet. And this is when we could fly the helicopter here over Camp 1 would be here, 19,800 feet. Now the helicopter's at 20,000, 24,000, 24,500 feet.
Wow.
This is Camp 4 here. This is a very crude rendering of what we're beginning. This is our first iteration. And now we can turn around. And now we're flying at 25,000 feet.
The fact
Advanced.
that this is a crude rendering is,
It's super crude.
is awe-inspiring.
It's not even-
It really
and
is.
we're counting on the team at Microsoft Research to put this in the pipeline
Yeah.
and write some algorithms that get rid of a lot of this stuff we're seeing here on the sides.
Wow.
So, but if you were flying this, you could stop wherever you wanted, turn 360 degrees, zoom in, zoom out,
Wow.
and fly over to our land-based stations. Because you know when I found Mars really interesting? It's not when those satellites were orbiting Mars, when the rover was there. Because that feet on the ground view is what we all are familiar with.
Right.
You know, that's how we, spend most of our time looking at things at an oblique angle. So that's one of our flights.
Well, and seeing your imagery there from the ground in your base camps and tents, that's the first thing that came to my mind was, this reminds me of like when I was a kid and I was discovering space and there's planets out there.
and it
You
was
know,
really cool.
This one's just on the other side of
Yeah.
ours, So talk about, when we circle back to Glacier Works, because obviously a lot of this comes back to global warming. What are you guys at Glacier Works advocating? You said you're not really trying to, you don't have obvious solutions, you're posing questions.
Well, but the science clearly points in a certain direction. The science is there's such an overwhelming, amount of evidence, and the science is really good. So we're pointing at the fact that we're going to be putting a lot more carbon in the air. When you look at the energy needs of China and India alone, who rightfully and have a legitimate interest in uplifting people to a modicum of the energy consumption that we have per person. Just a TV, just a refrigerator and an air conditioner, not a huge house, not a second home,
right,
not a big car. Then when you look at how they're going to get most of that energy, right now it's pointing towards cheap coal because they have it in abundance. It's also dirty coal, and it's just the only way they can keep, ramping up the energy supply to meet their energy needs. So if we look at once we force more carbon into the air through models, very well thought out models, then and we see a warming planet, then what we're interested in, what does that mean to the glaciers? Right. What do the glaciers mean to the hydrology of the region? Where there's going to be 500 million
effect,
more
right?
people by 2050.
Right.
So if there's more people, there's more need for water from industry, and so do they just become more efficient with water? Do people start arguing over water? Because guess what? We're talking about China, India, and Pakistan.
Right.
They're all antagonists. They're not all on the same side,
right, and
they all are very well armed. And I can tell you that when people need water, and that river I own flows into the river into your country, and I start taking some of that water out, that's your lifeblood, there will be squabbling over that.
Right.
It won't be so there's the small stuff of the farmer, right, who needs water for their crops or whatever that may be, and then there's the big picture of what does social stress because of lack of water lead to instability? Does instability lead to conflict? Those aren't my areas of expertise, but other people are very, very interested in water supply, the energy, water, and food nexus,
right,
coming up maybe in the next 50 years.
Well, and you talked about how you had that eureka moment of, wow, you said, Brashears, why didn't I know about this sooner? You've inspired some people even here just today on Twitter, conversations going on. We got a tweet here from V-Bird Dog. He said, hey, incredible stuff from David Brashears. How can I, as an average person, help get the story out about the glacial retreat? Because that's the bottom line here. We're living in a new world where we can tweet, social media. You no longer have to just pick up a phone and call a government or write a letter. How can the average person say, hey, I want to do something? You're right, this is a problem.
Well, I think I wish I could say unscrew a light bulb, but I can't.
Right.
Because you'd have to unscrew too many, given what's going to happen in India and China. I think what I would say is, first of all, on every level, especially if this person has children, make sure they're well informed and make sure they know how to get to good information, and find it. And then if they want to take action, get an education that allows them to take action. Like maybe they want to be a nurse scientist, maybe they want to be a glaciologist. You have to understand the problem before you can fix it. On another level, how do we compel our leaders to set examples, in corporation to set examples and to lead? And, myself, I have this deep yearning, this deep hunger for some clarion call, similar to what JFK issued about going to the moon, where it's not such a politically sensitive issue, and where it's not where two sides aren't willing to fight to the death, to win over this issue, to just say, look, folks, it's our planet. Let's work for a more positive outcome, because there can't be anything negative about putting less carbon into the air. That's just, there's no negative income to that, outcome.
I know what you're saying. I mean, instead of the, right now the kind of the green living thing is kind of a fun, hip thing to do that some people do. But what you're saying is, until we all wake up and say, no, the whole idea of green living and conserving and being aware of what we're putting out shouldn't be a cool thing to do. It's pretty practical. We should probably all start paying some attention.
Well, yeah, and it takes in progress.
Like you said, leading by example.
Yeah, and it's a process, and progress is incremental, you know. But also, let's not. It's not hope. I'm hopeful if we get the right people in the pipeline, the problem solvers, you know, when that they're going to make tremendous progress in the next decade. The thing about climate change, from what I've come to understand from now years of collecting information, sort of as a journalist, and I have to decide, you know, what's consistently the best information, is that there might be a point where the planet and the warming take on a life of its own, the so-called tipping point. And then the amount of carbon being put into the air naturally and that is not being pulled out will completely be, you know, magnitudes greater than what we put in as human beings. So what we don't want to do, it's called the greenhouse gamble at MIT, is get to a point to where no matter what we do, it doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Final 30 seconds here. What would you say? You said if we get the right people on board, for the computer scientists, the engineers watching today, what's your advice? What's your takeaway for them? What can they do?
Well, what I would like is to harness a lot of those good minds and that computing power to build GlacierWorks into a model for interactive teaching, for a place where teachers can go and create their own lessons and students can create lessons that become master lessons, where it's a place that we can not only judge how students perform, but how teachers perform.
Right.
And so we're probably for the first time in my life, I would say too ambitious, because we never thought the first live broadcast on Everest, the first IMAX camera, was too ambitious. Right. But now just organizing all these different groups to make this site what we think it should be, it's really ambitious.
David Brashears, great stuff, man. Thank you so much for your time. We thank you. The Earth thanks you. And we're excited to see what you're up to next. We're going to keep tabs on you, all right?
And I thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be the keynote, I guess, tomorrow afternoon.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
All right, coming up, we've got the lowdown on a room that knows who you are by your footprint. So wear the right shoes. News on using technology to fight crime, and a penetrating discussion of the political and technological implications of internet governance. Stay tuned for all of that. But first, we're going to spend a few more minutes in the Himalayas as we learn how the Microsoft Translator Hub is helping the people of Nepal and can help communities preserve languages around the world.
The day I heard languages were dying, I wondered what else was being killed. Millions of words mutilated, thousands of songs unsung, hundreds of stories untold. Which language, I pondered, would answer this? How long would it take for humanity to be human? The day I heard languages were dying, I didn't feel so alive myself.
Yeah, now he slide out. Okay.
More and more information is being made available on the web. So our goal really has been to develop Microsoft Translator Hub in such a way that it would be web accessible from anywhere in the world. This empowers communities and organizations that want to build custom translation models to really take control of it, to create, improve, even deploy the system without a translator service getting in the way. You know, this sense of empowerment allows under-resourced communities in particular to preserve their language and their community and culture for generations to come.
So as Microsoft looks to provide support and services to governments and countries all over the world, we have to embrace and respect the local communities to create cultural opportunities, economic opportunities, and opportunities for individuals to communicate within their communities and communities all over the world in their language with their culture and history preserved. And Microsoft Translator Hub enables that opportunity for governments, for communities, and for citizens all over the world.
What we did is we ran a couple of workshops, and we did this in order to reach out specifically to language communities. One of them was with the Hmong in Fresno, and the other one was actually at Kathmandu University with the Nepali language. The Nepalese students that we interacted with at Kathmandu, well, many of them weren't even fluent in their own language, which was very surprising to discover, that they were more fluent in English than they were in their own native language.
I personally don't speak in Nepali fluently, and the project Microsoft Translator Hub is helping me improve my fluency, and I think it will also help in preserving the Nepali language.
The elders inside of the Hmong community were watching their culture slip away, one elder at a time.
If we don't do anything about it, the culture and the language of the Hmong is going to disappear in this country. But with projects such as this, it's going to be one of the very important steps that we can take to stop this from happening.
The project is very important to Hmong. First of all, well, there are many reasons. One of them, of course, that comes to my mind is that the language itself, the written language itself, is less than 60 years old. So that makes it very difficult for the Hmong people to actually preserve any type of culture or any type of written language. So the project not only allows the non-speakers of English to be able to access information that are in English, but also it allows the speakers to now network across countries.
This machine translation project, which will work on the Nepali English sphere, will help us share our culture, local tradition and rituals to the rest of the world.
How do we do more, preserve more languages and more cultures as we go forward? Today it's Nepali and Hmong. Tomorrow, it's the world.
Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.